Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's time for another It's the Bread story. My guest today is Shamra Martin, and I am so happy that she emailed me to share her story. I often hear people say that they can't eat bread because they're diabetic or even pre-diabetic or worried about blood sugar issues. And even when people are considering real bread made from freshly milled flour, I get asked, how is this bread going to affect my blood sugar issues? Well, today, I want to share some good news with you. While the commercially processed flour and bread products that are devoid of fiber and high in sugar tend to spike our blood sugar levels, and the high sugar, low fiber diet of America is actually contributing to the rise of diabetes in adults and children alike, real whole grains and real bread have the opposite effect. White sugar, along with commercially processed white flour products, are considered simple carbohydrates, while whole grains and bread made from freshly milled whole grains, along with most real fruits and vegetables, are complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates, such as our whole grains and bread made from freshly milled flour, are high in fiber and are therefore more slowly digested and broken down than those simple carbohydrates. This in turn contributes to a slower conversion of the carbohydrates into sugar, which our bodies need for energy. This slow release of sugars into the bloodstream prevents the rapid spikes in our blood sugar that we often see when processed foods and breads are consumed. An added bonus is that this slow release of sugars that our bodies use for energy gives our body the ability to give us sustained energy throughout the day, eliminating those abrupt highs and lows and sudden crashes that we often experience from consuming simple carbohydrates in the form of high sugar foods such as snacks, candies, and our beverages that we love to drink here in America. And it's not just the fiber that plays a part in keeping our blood sugar in check. The abundance of B vitamins found in the bran and germ portions of whole grains, and of course our real bread made from this freshly milled flour, such as thiamine and riboflavin, these are key players in carbohydrate metabolism, and they help our bodies convert that sugar into energy. Whole grains are also a rich source of chromium, an insulin cofactor that encourages the uptake of sugar into our cells to produce energy. So we can absolutely say that whole grains are an essential part of a healthy diet to manage and improve blood sugar issues. And my guest today is here to share her unexpected benefits when she and her husband incorporated real bread made with freshly milled flour into their diets. So Shamra, welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I am so glad you joined me today. Why don't you just begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
My name is Shamra Martin, and I live in southern Minnesota. We like to joke that all the snow that falls in South Dakota blows to our front door, but this year we haven't had much snow yet, so it's kind of looking a little different. But anyway, I am married. I got married for the first time at 40. I met my husband on eHarmony of all things. He had been previously married, and he had two little girls that were 6 and 8, Elizabeth and Kathleen. And so I became a mother and a wife at the age of 40, which was a little bit of a learning curve.
I can imagine.
And so from this point forward, I always refer to my daughters as my daughters because I don't call them my stepdaughters.
Right.
I just last year, my daughter Kathleen had a little girl, so I became a Meemaw. And she actually gave birth yesterday to twin girls.
Oh
And
my
so we're
goodness.
so excited because now we have two more little girls to love on, and we just can't wait to meet them. But we're going to be going down to their place to meet the babies later. Anyway, so I'm a Meemaw and a wife, and I live in southern Minnesota. So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
Yes, I love it. Well, congratulations on your new granddaughters. Wow, that exponentially changed the
Yeah,
numbers, didn't it?
yeah. When we found out she was having twins, we both, my husband and I, we just look at each other and we say, "We're having twins. We're having twins."
Yes, yes, yes. That is wonderful. Grandchildren are just a wonderful blessing
Oh,
from
they
the Lord.
are. They're
Yeah.
so much fun.
Yes, yes, they are. Well, okay, so you emailed me that you I want you to share with how you first heard about Bread Beckers and what led you on this bread journey. You mentioned that it was actually your husband's health diagnosis that put you kind of in research mode. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my husband Dale was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which Hashimoto's is an autoimmune that attacks the thyroid. And if it goes unchecked, it can actually kill the thyroid. The antibodies can kill the thyroid. And so he was basically told to give up sugar, dairy, and gluten because those are inflammatory foods that can drive that autoimmune. And so I began, and he did a really good job of, he's my cookies and milk guy, and he did a really good job of cutting out the sugar and cutting out the dairy, but bread was a little bit more of an issue. And we were buying what I thought was a really great quality bread, but didn't have any idea at that point that it was still really bad. And I'd heard these ideas that somehow the flour or the wheat in Europe was better than American wheat. And so I went online and I found what basically is an einkorn flour. At the time, I had no idea what that meant. But it was so expensive that I was like, I just couldn't imagine buying it. And because I searched for that, then the actual berries started to come up, and I thought, well, that seems like it might be a cheaper option, and that kind of took me on this route over to YouTube. And I really appreciate our technology today, because you can jump on YouTube and you can search almost anything and you can
Yes.
find all sorts of resources, and that's where I heard about the Wonder Mill, and I started to see your videos and videos by other ladies, and I started watching it all, and I realized it wasn't American wheat that was the problem. It was the
Yeah,
flour. And
exactly.
and so we ordered the Wonder Mill, and I ordered the hard red, and I ordered is it Kursan or Kamut?
Khorasan is
Corsan.
the type of wheat. Kamut's a brand name. Mhm.
Yes, yes. And so I ordered some of that, and I ordered soft white wheat. And while we were waiting for all of that to come, I was watching her videos. And the more I learned about what they had done to our flour, I just really got mad.
Yes, it can make you a little feisty, can it? You're like, what are they doing? And why isn't somebody stopping this? Yeah.
And why aren't they educating us that this is what's going on? So anyway, so the stuff all came, and we made that first loaf I have a Zudarushi bread maker that my family had gotten me years ago. And I made that first loaf, and we just couldn't believe how good it was. I never would have made a 100% whole wheat bread in my bread maker before, just because it would have tasted like cardboard and it would have been dry. But this was soft and moist, and it had so much flavor. And that just began this journey. And so I travel a lot in my car, and I'll download your podcast on my phone, and I will listen to 3 or 4 of them while I'm driving. And then every time I hear it's a bread story, I just get so excited for these people, and we'll never go back. I mean, we will always continue to mill our own flour. So anyway,
Yes, yes. Now
that's how it all kind of started.
Yeah, I loved your words that you said. I dove down the rabbit hole of bread Beckers. Yes, the internet is a wonderful thing, but the next thing you know, 2 hours later, you're down this.
Exactly. And the more you learn, it's so exciting what this incredibly nutritiously dense food that Papa God gave us.
Yes.
That is just amazing. And
I know. And I'm like, Lord, why didn't you show me this sooner? And I don't know why, but you've only been on this journey since about September, right? About 4 months now?
We got our Wonder Mill on September the 9th, and I made my first loaf as soon as I pulled it out of the box and set it up.
Wow, that's exactly the way I did too. That meal came into my house, and I made bread that day, and it was noticeable. I teased and I said, I made bread that night, ate bread, and I pooped the next morning. Woo, this was glorious. But now, so you started kind of for your husband, and you aren't sure if it's helped your husband yet. But to your surprise, you have seen some great benefits. And I am so excited for you to share how the bread helped you. So tell us about that.
Well, I was probably pre-diabetic in my 30s, and most people probably don't know that they're pre-diabetic because the symptoms are so you just can't tell. And
Right.
And if you're not going to the doctor very frequently, then that's probably an issue too. But I was diagnosed fully diabetic in my mid 40s, and the first medication they always kind of put you on is metformin, and when I first started on metformin, I didn't have any severe side effects to it. But as I aged, it began to cause some pretty severe side effects in terms of digestion issues, which isn't really, I mean, its purpose is to disrupt your digestion. So it doesn't surprise me. But so I probably was on that medication for quite a while, and I would tell the doctor I was having these really severe life-altering kind of digestion issues where if I didn't have a bathroom during the day, it was a bad thing because when I had to go, I had to go. And they just didn't. It really was really frustrating to the point that I finally had to just say, I'm not taking this anymore. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Your quality of life is greatly diminished when you can't control your bowels.
I was mid 50s and having to wear Depends. I mean, it just was horrible. So they put me on a different medication that is a once a week injectable. And that medication, after a few weeks, it reversed that result and I became constipated. But when you've been dealing with severe diarrhea for so long, constipation almost seems like a relief.
A welcome relief. Yes.
But after I had been on it for a while, then it went back to, and I've heard that constipation and diarrhea are kind of the same thing, but the opposite sides of a coin. Yeah. And so it wasn't surprising that I would fluctuate between having diarrhea and being constipated with that medication. So when I set up the mill and we started making the bread and I started eating it, at first I was a little nervous because up to this point, I had finally gotten my diet to the place where I was probably eating maybe 1 or 2 slices of bread a day, and they were from these smaller, denser, supposedly higher fiber breads that the slices were small and thin, and it was something that I really didn't try to eat a whole lot of, and so we made these loaves, and the loaves that come out of the Zudarushi are much bigger, and I just loved the bread so much that I was eating it. And my blood sugar, I'm not insulin dependent, so I'm not testing my sugars every day because of that. And I just started eating the bread, and
Yeah. Yeah, but before you started milling, you actually kind of followed the age old advice of limit your bread if you have.
exactly.
Yeah.
I would splurge sometimes and have a dessert just like anybody,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I was really, and I had even tried. I had tried doing keto, and I had actually even done the low carb diet for a while.
Yeah.
And with both of those, I really never saw a significant change in my blood sugars. In fact, when I was doing those, I was actually deliberately testing my blood sugars, and I would wake up in the morning and there would be no significant change.
Yeah.
I was eating with the keto, I was eating 1 carb serving a day. And that's like 15 grams of a carbohydrate. So it might have been a small piece of fruit, or it might have been 1 slice of bread, that kind of thing with the keto, and really saw no significant difference.
Yeah.
And so when I started eating this, I was a little nervous. So I
Yeah.
actually contacted my doctor and asked her if she would put in a prescription for the testing strips so that I could begin to test myself just to see what it was doing.
Yeah.
But that kind of process was delayed a bit. And so I started eating September 9th, and I had my next blood work on November the 7th. And so it was just about 2
2
months
months. Yeah.
of eating the bread. And when you get your blood work and you do an A1C, it tests your blood sugars basically for the last 3 months.
Yes.
So it will give you basically an average of what your blood sugars have been. And
Yeah.
so I typically have been my A1C. So a normal A1C would be anything below 6. Most diabetics have a tough time getting to 6. My mom was diabetic. My dad was diabetic. My having diabetes myself wasn't a big surprise because of that genetic connection. So my A1Cs typically, if I'm being disciplined, would run somewhere between 7.2 to 7.5 when I would do my A1C. So when I got that blood work done in November, and it came up on my portal, my A1C was at 6.7. And that's I have not been below 7 in years. And I was so excited.
Wow. You're like 2 months of bread.
I was eating bread and I was below 7. And I gained weight during that time because it was so good, and I actually was probably eating more than I should. But I ate a lot of bread and it was 6.7. That was the totally amazing thing to me.
Yeah.
Such a blessing.
And now did you check your daily blood sugar? Were you monitoring that, or have you monitored that at all?
So my daily morning, I usually test it in the morning, and and here again, I'm a person who I typically eat about 2 meals a day and 1 snack. Part of that is just because of not being very hungry.
Yeah.
But the other part of that is I've been trying to do a little bit more of what I would call a of intermittent fast, where my last meal or the last thing I eat is usually somewhere around 4:30 in the afternoon, and then I won't eat again until breakfast to give myself that longer period of a fast. So my blood sugars in the mornings had gone from, I would wake up and they typically would be about 168, which is this high.
Yeah.
But there again, I'm diabetic, and normal is anything 100 and below, just so people know that.
Yes.
So when I started eating the bread, my blood sugars went to 130. So I was going from 168 in the morning to 130, which is why my A1C was significantly lower than it had
Right.
been. And I'm actually kind of excited to see what my next A1C will be, because eating the bread has really increased my energy level. And prior to this, exercise was really kind of difficult. Just because I didn't have the energy to do it. You know, I would go to work, and when I got done working, I was pretty much done for the day. And now I feel like I actually can exercise. That's the, and that's such a blessing too, because I know that exercise is such a huge part of being diabetic, but when you're just dragging all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
because your body can't adequately access the carbohydrate to actually turn it into energy.
Exactly.
So this somehow, my body is just responding in a way where I have energy to do stuff.
Yeah.
And
And that's that was one of the first things I noticed. And when we started milling, I already had 5 children. I was homeschooling, and I had 3 young ones that I had very
can't
close
imagine.
together. So I understand. I was like, oh, by 4 o'clock, I'm like, I just want to go to bed. Can we just be done? My kids still tell
Exactly.
me, Mom, put us to bed before dark. And I'm like, that's because I just couldn't go on. I was ready to go to bed. But that was one of the things I noticed. And like I mentioned, at the beginning of the podcast, that's why I wanted to share some information. It is so critical that we stabilize those blood sugar issues, those spikes and drops, that when that drops, it leaves us just not wanting to go on, and usually craving then sugar, caffeine, something to get us back up. But the slow release of those carbohydrates that our body has to have for energy, to create energy, that just keeps that sustained energy all day. That's what I found. I was like, wow, I'm no longer having those highs and lows and drops. And when I have a really, really busy, tough day, yeah, I still come home and I'm like, okay, I'm really tired. And I may not go for my walk or exercise or whatever. But I tell people, if you're on a weight loss journey, change the bread and it will start giving you energy. You'll be full. You'll be satisfied. So I just think that's fascinating. So I know people listening are wondering, how much bread did you eat? I know in your email you mentioned even sweetbreads and muffins, and you still saw that those blood
that
sugar levels
drop.
go down. Yeah.
So I was eating a slice of bread for breakfast in the morning, a slice of bread at lunch with some type of sandwich or something. And then I used to have popcorn for my last snack of the day, but I ended up beginning to have a slice of bread with peanut butter as my last little snack in the afternoon before I stopped eating for the day. So in the midst of that, my husband, who is my cookies and milk guy, I started making sweetbreads, which he absolutely loves and I love, your apple pie sweetbread that's in
Oh,
your
yeah.
cookbook. In fact, he just asked me yesterday if I'd make another one of those. So we were making banana bread, pumpkin bread, zucchini bread, your apple pie sweetbread, and I was eating those too. Now within moderation, because there again, but my husband, he was like, I finally came to the point where I realized that if I made it in the muffin form rather than the sweetbread form, it would last a few days more than
Yeah.
it did if I made it in the sweetbread.
Yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
would just eat a larger slice. But when I did it in the muffin form, it would last longer.
Yes.
I
So
wasn't
because going for a second muffin was a little too much, but cutting a big hunk of
exactly.
bread. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the other piece of it. Yes, I was eating sweetbreads, and I had already converted to using instead of using white sugar, I was using evaporated cane sugar.
Yeah.
We use a lot of honey, and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I had already made some of those changes, but yeah, I was eating sweetbreads, and I still saw a drop, which
Yeah.
was totally amazing to me.
No, and you said something about, you ate these more in moderation. I also find that with real whole grains, it's easy to do that because they fill you up. Where
Yeah.
you're going to have to sit there with that bag of chocolate chip cookies or whatever from the store. You're like, oh, I want another one.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to resist
Yeah.
that and not eat the whole bag. But I find that even a cookie that I make, if I want something sweet, usually one is all I need, maybe two every now and then. But and like a muffin, that's enough for me,
And like you had said, the cravings weren't really there.
Right.
Before
Yeah. See,
having
and
having
go
a
ahead.
muffin like that in the house would have been a real temptation to just overeat it.
Yeah.
And in this, I didn't have that temptation because having just one of them kind of met a little bit of
Satisfying.
joy in my life. And,
Yeah.
and I
And it
was,
satisfies. It
yeah,
satisfies, And
yep,
that's what I noticed. And again, we're getting those good carbohydrates that our body needs for energy at a sustained release. So we don't have those drops and highs and significant lows. And that's, I think, in a way, makes us one of the factors of craving. And it's exciting to know that those with blood sugar issues can eat bread again,
yeah,
as long as it's real bread, because it saddens me that they're told you can't have bread. And eating real bread can even bring great improvement in blood sugar levels and help. That was news to me that it would help with those medication side effects. I think you said you even saw that.
yeah. Well, that took a little bit longer. It was probably December before I actually started to see some real improvements in my digestion. I'd gotten to the place where I pretty much lived with a stomach ache all the time. The medication just caused that kind of a disruption, along with that constant either having constipation or diarrhea. And in December, I started to see that my bowel movements started to be more normal. The stomach pains were going away, which when you've been living with that for years, it was so amazing. And I was so hopeful that it could, because of the podcasts that I listened to with you. And yet if I'd have a normal day, I'd be a little bit hopeful, but I'd be worried that something
Tomorrow
was going to, yeah, exactly.
tomorrow we could be right back. Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so I was hesitant to even say anything to my husband or to my daughters, because it was like, what if I say something and it just all goes back to the way it was before? And so, but by December, everything was becoming more normal and the stomach pains were going away. And, I feel at this point almost normal again, which, for a decade of living with constant digestion issues, it's really, I am so thankful
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Papa God decided to open this door to us and to give us Sue Becker as a teacher in the process.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I'm very flattered, but he gave us food to nourish our bodies, and just to come back to that truth and his way of eating and doing it, it is absolutely amazing. Now, you mentioned something that I wanted to point out here, that A1C test is a measure of blood sugar levels over the past few months. It's kind of an average. And
Yep.
because of this, I have had people come back and say they've not seen as rapid and a significant decline as you did in just a short time. In fact, some have even reported that it went up, especially if they had it checked within just a month, of eating the real bread. So what they were seeing, it was still averaging in that high level from the months before the bread. So, but most of the time, after a few more months of whole grains and real bread, they will see a significant drop. And for you, it was 2 months. So that was 2 good months with 1 month still averaged in. So everyone responds differently. So I just want to say to any of my listeners, if your A1C has gone up or not gone down like Shamra's did, don't be discouraged. Stay the course, and I think you'll see some great results. And also, I was thinking about this, and you mentioned, like constipation and diarrhea is kind of the same issue, different sides of the coin. So is high blood sugar and low blood sugar. It's still an uptake issue of your sugars and all that. So people struggling with hypoglycemia may be wondering if whole grains and real bread can help you. And I just want to say, absolutely yes. Because the key is keeping that blood sugar stable and steady instead of spikes and drops and spikes and drops. So with the hypoglycemic, when your blood sugar drops, you can't produce the hormone to get it brought back up to normal. So so that's exciting. And I've even had lots of testimonies of people saying that their hypoglycemia was completely reversed. The key is whole grains and real bread prevents the rapid rise and drops in blood sugar and keeps your blood sugar levels more steady. Real bread eaten throughout the day, like you did, can help both high blood sugar and low blood sugar. So that's exciting, Shamra. I'm just so glad you wrote me. Thank you for your email. I want to tell everyone, if you have a It's the Bread story, email me. You might be my next guest, because I love it. And it just confirms, what I've been learning and what we've been seeing. And it gives substance to the science behind it all, I think. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to share your story. And I know it's going to encourage all who are listening. And I'm looking forward to hearing a testimony from your husband as well. So we're going to stay tuned for coming attractions. And I just want to, before we close out, is there anything else you would like to share? Any other parts of your story or any words of encouragement that you want to leave with our listeners?
Well, I think the really neat thing is that this freshly milled flour can be adapted to almost any recipe. So I had a dinner roll recipe that I would use for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and using the hard white wheat, I was able to adapt those recipes to make those. And there again, my husband says they're like little angels on your tongue, those little dinner rolls. But also, my mother-in-law passed down a buttermilk chocolate cake recipe to us that she used to bake all the time when Dale was growing up, and we use it for all of our birthdays. And there again, I use the soft white wheat to make that buttermilk chocolate cake. And both Dale and I will look at each other and say, we would never know that it was whole wheat, because it's just so moist and soft. And usually on my Wonder Mill, I will use the pastry setting when I grind it for that cake, just to make it a little softer, a little less fibrous. But it's just amazing how you can adapt almost any recipe. And it's really not all that difficult to do. And so anyway, I had one question.
Okay.
So powdered sugar, on your website, you talk about using sucrant and honey to make powdered sugar. How do you do that?
So, sucanat with honey, or we now sell it. It's also known as honey granules, is what we sell.
Okay.
Or in my essential home ground flour book, I call it light evaporated cane juice. So I just blend it in a blender. I just put a cup or so in a blender and blend it. It will never come up powdered like powdered sugar, really like almost like talcum powder. It'll still be rather coarse, but that's once you mix it in with the icing, it just helps it to be more dissolvable, if that makes that's the word. So that's how I do it. Not in your mill. You don't want to ever put any sugar or anything in your grain mill, but I just use a blender and I powder it. So
because there again, my mother-in-law taught me how to make homemade icing, and I had never done that before. And and I would love to be able to do a more healthier. I don't know if that's really the word you want to use for icing.
It is.
But
yeah, it is. And one thing I tell people, like I've made buttercream icings, I've iced cakes, I decorate cakes, I've made my girls' wedding cakes, with the powdered honey granules or sucanat with honey. And one thing I tell people is make the icing a little bit ahead, let it sit. And I do this even for my cinnamon rolls. If I'm making a glaze, I make the icing while the cinnamon rolls are baking. Then before and let it sit, and then I whip it up, fluff it up, because that gives those granules a little time to dissolve and go into suspension a little better.
To absorb the moisture from the butter and the milk a little bit more.
Yes. Whereas powdered sugar, because it's so powdery, it just fluffs right up. So that's what I do. And
so do you have to add a little bit more milk than you normally would when you're doing it, or a little bit more butter?
I don't think so. I don't find that. I'm kind of a dump and go girl, so, but not typically, I don't think.
I just wanted to learn from the master here,
Well, and hey, you know what? I know that all of our listeners are going to go, we want that buttermilk chocolate cake recipe. So if you want to shoot that to me in an email, we might have to post a link to that.
I definitely will send it to you, because it is, I don't know where Francis got it from, but it is the most wonderful little chocolate cake you could ever eat. So anyway.
Yum. Yeah, that sounds great. But so that's what I do and that's what I use. So anyway, well, Shamra, thank you again for sharing today. I just know this is going to encourage so many people listening. And I want to say to all my listeners, share this podcast. When you hear it, share this episode, because the rising incidence of diabetes and high blood sugar, low blood sugar is it's something to be concerned about. And probably every one of us know someone that's struggling with blood sugar issues, and they're being told to not eat bread, and they're being told keto and low carb and high protein. And I'm going to do a podcast one day on all that. So how dangerous it can be. So long term. But anyway, so just thank you again, Shamra. It's just been so exciting to read your story, hear your story now firsthand. To all my listeners today, until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.